Now, one of the other reasons, excuse me for a second. One of the other reasons why Tableau is such a great fit for embedding is that you actually have, I do have a question here about embedding Tableau on a SharePoint site. So the question is, are there any differences for embedding Tableau on a SharePoint site? Now, that depends on how your users are actually logging into SharePoint. Essentially, no. You just have to include the Tableau Online view actually within SharePoint. If your users are accessing Tableau from inside your corporate network, it's possible that they are already logged into your Active Directory, in which case they can be automatically signed into Tableau. It's also possible that they're logged into your SharePoint site using something called ADFS, which is a single sign-on mechanism from Microsoft. So there's different ways that to be done. The actual embedding is quite simple, but the authentication could be more complex. It might be interesting to understand kind of what authentication mechanism you're actually using for that, because that would really kind of govern the way that you need to sign into Tableau as well. And another question I've got is, okay, is there anything to be aware of when updating Tableau server, particularly with regards to authentication in the app? There aren't any particular implications of upgrading Tableau server on the authentication itself. One of the things that we recommend with our embedding customers is that they actually maintain test and development environments along with their production environments. That's so that when they're actually modifying a Tableau dashboard, they can be sure that it's not going to have any unwanted effects on their application itself. That's not typically common, but it's always good to consider. Often, if you're using Tableau for an internal use case, it might be that you just kind of publish dashboards and share dashboards quite quickly, kind of quick fire analysis. But when you've got those dashboards embedded in an application that users depend on, it's more important to test everything before you actually kind of push any changes out to the user itself. And then the final question is, how do you update the user filters automatically as new users are added to a group? Now that's a really good question. So in the use case that we had before, if I go back to Tableau for a second, excuse me. In the use case that we had before, this entitlements table, which contained the list of users, ideally this would come from a live data source, and that data source would be updated as your source data is updated. Now, if that's not the case, and you're actually having to manage your security using something called groups, then you would need to automatically add and remove users from those groups in order to actually have those filters updated automatically as well. Now, actually, that kind of automated task is what I was actually about to discuss next. So that works really well timing wise. So one of the big benefits when you're embedding Tableau is there's an extremely rich ecosystem of APIs which you can use to automate tasks and really give really good deep integration with your application itself. So these are the 5 main ones that I'm going to cover now. So the main tool really here is what we call the Tableau Server REST API. And this is the ability to automate tasks on Tableau Server using a server-side API. Now, tasks that you might want to manage are perhaps adding users to the server. Perhaps you've got a new customer that's just joined and they need to be automatically added to Tableau Server. You can use the API. You can also manage security groups. So this could be adding a group, adding a user to a group that is going to have access to data from the South region, data from the North region. That could be managed using the API. The API can also be used to manage permissions. So say, for example, you've got a special set of users who have access to download some of the raw data behind a report. You might not want to give that to everybody, but if you do actually want to update users' permissions, you can actually do that using the API. Everything that you can do using the API, you can also do manually within the Tableau interface, which is an option if you're small. But if you get to managing hundreds or thousands of users, then these APIs are really the best way of kind of doing that kind of task en masse. What you can also do is you can manage licenses. So if you need to deactivate the license of somebody that's not been active on the site for a year, perhaps, you can manage that. And you can also use the REST API to publish content. So if you've got a new version of the dashboard that you want to publish, or say, for example, you've got the same dashboard that you want to customize for 10 different users and automate the publishing of that, you can use the REST API. Now, another tool, which is part of the ecosystem but less important, is webhooks. And this basically allows you to trigger events in your application depending on when something happens within Tableau server. So this is kind of the reverse of the API essentially. So if you have a schedule that is refreshing some data and that schedule fails, and your application needs to know about that, you can use a webhook to send a signal to the application. Perhaps the credentials for the database have changed, or there's a network issue, and you really need to make sure that you're aware that your users don't have access to up-to-date data. Then you can use a webhook for that. In terms of the JavaScript API, whilst the REST API controls communication between the server and your application, the JavaScript API actually controls the interaction between your application and the embedded dashboard itself. So it could be that you have a button on the dashboard that you want to change something in your app, or you've got a button in your app that you want to use to change something into the dashboard. So if I actually go back to the Tableau server examples, excuse me, sorry, if I go back to, here we go. If we go back to the JavaScript example, sorry, that Tableau make available, there are some examples of how you might want to do that JavaScript API communication here. So this is where we have an embedded visualization. And you can see we actually have filters built into Tableau, but we also have a filter which is built into the web page. It isn't immediately obvious because of the way it's located, but this is part of the website itself and not part of the Tableau visualization. So if I click on this drop-down filter and I pick on 2014, then that will automatically update the Tableau visualization based on the filter that I've set. This could be quite useful if you've got a complex set of filters that you want to specify for a user, or the filter context is dynamic depending on what the user is doing in your application. So it's all about making it as seamless and simple for the user to interact with the dashboards as possible. What we also often see is if users, if they have very strong style guides to their applications, and they're not necessarily that happy with some of the way that the ones in Tableau are shown. For example, you can't always customize these drop downs to be completely seamless with your application. In which case, what you might want to do is have an external drop down that you can style using some kind of web framework and make the Tableau dashboard look like the rest of your visualization. That's quite a common use case for the JavaScript API. Yep, so it's possible to control dashboard from the application and control application from the dashboard. It's also possible to control the mobile layouts. Now, when you're building a dashboard in Tableau, you can specify different layouts that are shown on mobile devices, on phones, on tablets, and desktop. And Tableau does a very good job of inferring the screen size that you're viewing the dashboard on and actually showing you the right view for that screen size. That being said, is if your application itself has its own way of detecting if it's a mobile or if it's a desktop, then you might want to actually take away control from Tableau and actually you explicitly tell Tableau, oh, this customer is using our application on a mobile device, so I want you to give them the mobile layout. And those mobile layouts are actually very easy to create. If I just dive back into Tableau for a second, you can see that in these dashboards that I've made, look at the device preview, I can actually see what these dashboards look like on the different devices, and I can add a tablet layout, I could add a phone layout, and then I can customize these individual layouts for the different views. Tableau tries to give you a default layout out of the box, guessing the reorganization of the elements. However, if you really want to customize that and you want to control which elements are shown and the order the elements are shown, on different devices, then you can actually create these layouts here. And then the final two parts of the API ecosystem that are quite useful are the Hyper API and the Document API. Now, what Tableau is great at is connecting to a wide array of data sources, joining data between those sources, and then pulling them into Tableau. But if you've actually got a very complex data pipeline or an application that doesn't store data in a way that is accessible by Tableau, you actually might want to use the Hyper API to push that data into Tableau, rather than allowing Tableau to pull it out of your systems. That means you can do a lot more complex processes with that. We have a few customers that do this because they're gathering their data from APIs, gathering their data from text files, gathering their data from web services, some of which are quite legacy, and they've got an existing application which combines all that data. So they use the Hyper API to actually push that into Tableau. And finally, we have something called the Document API. The Document API is a way of programmatically modifying Tableau workbooks. So perhaps your different customers have different database credentials they need to use, or different logos perhaps, or kind of a local modification to that dashboard itself. That is a way of modifying that dashboard before it's published to Tableau server. Now, the good thing with a lot of these APIs is that they really work in unison with each other. So for example, a common task might be that I want to download an existing workbook from the server. I might want to modify that workbook and then push that back to the server. What I could use is I could use the REST API to download the content. I would then use the Document API to modify some of that content, and then I would use the REST API to publish that back to the server. And again, when I was talking before about the rich community, there's lots of really great examples about how to do a lot of these things on Tableau's developer documentation. So whilst it's very easy to just drag and drop some code and make the dashboard work out of the box, if you really want to go to town and to customize it a lot, you've got the option of doing that as well. And just to illustrate how easy this is to do, I'm going to take you through a quick API example. So you'll notice up here I mentioned that you have the option of using the REST API and the Tableau server client library. Now, the REST API you can call from almost any programming language, whether your application is built using Java or Go or C# or anything else. But what Tableau do is they make a tool called the Tableau server client library, which is specifically a Python tool. And this allows you to really simply automate some tasks in Tableau server very easily. So I have some very basic code that I wrote using the Tableau server client library. Now, the challenge that I'm trying to overcome here is that I'm logged on to Tableau server. Or I'm not logged on to Tableau server, I should say. And I am trying to add a user to this server. So perhaps I have an embedded application and I have 1,000 new users and I need to make sure they all get added to Tableau. But I don't want to do that manually, and I want that all to be handled within the application. Then this can all be done using the API. So in this case, all that I'm doing is I'm importing some tools from Tableau. I am just logging into my site, so I have the address for our site, and I have some secure credentials that are stored securely in my laptop. So you can generate tokens that you can use for APIs within Tableau server or Tableau online. So I'm just going to quickly run both of these parts of code. So I'm going to log into the server. And then what these two functions do is they check if a user exists using my name. And then if that user doesn't exist, they add the user. And then the final bit of code checks if the user exists, again, using my name. And then if that user does exist, then it tries to remove it. You can actually see here that my user actually already exists on the server. So that wasn't what I intended. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to run the last bit of code, and you can see that that user will have been removed. So that user has now been removed from the server. And then if I want to re-add the user, I can run the first part of code. And then if I go back to the server, I can see that that user has been re-added, and you can see my name here. Obviously, this is a really simple example, but it gives you the idea of just how little code you can actually write into your application in order to automate these kind of tasks. the code is very similar depending if you're wanting to create a user, if I wanted to add this user to a group, if I wanted to give this user some permissions to do things like download a PDF copy of a report. This is all very easy to write, and again it's quite well documented. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly dive into a few complex things that you might want to do using these APIs. So the first one is provisioning users. So when you get a new user for your embedded application, you need to actually add that user to your app, or make sure that your user can actually access Tableau, I should say. And there's a few different ways of doing this. The first is called just-in-time provisioning. So this is effectively meaning that you're not going to create the user in Tableau until the first time they try and access Tableau from within your app. So in this case, as a user, I will try and access the application. The application knows that I'm trying to access a Tableau dashboard. The application then makes a call to Tableau saying, does Connell exist? Tableau says, okay, no, that user doesn't exist. So what the application then does is says, okay, I'm going to create a user for Connell so that he can access that Tableau dashboard. And then once that's done, and this can take a few fractions of a second, the application then returns a response to me saying, okay, here's the link for the Tableau dashboard, and then I am immediately able to access that dashboard from Tableau server. Yep, so that's seamless for the user. From all I'm concerned, I've tried to log into the dashboard. Tableau and the application very quickly work together to give me access to it. And I've never known that prior to that I didn't have access. This could be particularly useful if you know that a lot of users of your application might not necessarily want to be granted access to Tableau. So say you've got 100,000 users and you think only 100 might want to view the dashboard. You don't necessarily want to create those 100,000 users and assign the licenses in Tableau. So you can actually do it just in time, depending on when the user first tries to access the application. The second option is what we call synchronization provisioning, and this is a little bit simpler because it requires less modification to your existing application, but it does require another script or another tool to be deployed to do so. So this could be a simple Python script like the one that I've showed you. And what synchronization provisioning does is it checks all of your users that should have access to the application from whatever identity store you use. That could be something as complex as a database, and it could be some kind of web service. And then what it does is it checks all those users have been created in Tableau server. And if those users haven't been created in Tableau server, then it adds them. So effectively, that means that you're going to be creating them in advance, and you're going to be deciding in advance who has access to Tableau server outside of your application. That way, the second that they actually get to the application, they're already created on the server or the online site, and the content's ready for them. The final one is the simplest, is called push provisioning. Now, there are some identity providers that will allow you to automatically send a signal to external services like Tableau when a user is first created. That means that you don't have to do any additional development work in terms of building the just-in-time flow or building the synchronization flow. The second that somebody's actually added to your identity store, whether that's a service like Okta, for example, then will a signal can be sent to Tableau server, which will create those users. The other thing that you can use the APIs for is a way of customizing a user's experience. So say, for example, you have users which have strict privacy requirements, and they each have individual sites. You might have 10 sites for 10 different customers, but say, for example, each customer wants something customized in their dashboard. A particular example of this might be if you have customers in different regions. Perhaps somebody wants a French translation or a Belgian translation. What you can do in this case is you can have a set of master workbooks shown on here on the left-hand side, and you could have a customer list of all the customers that need a copy of these workbooks with any kind of customization, and then you can have a broadcast deployment process. Now, what this broadcast deployment process would do would use the API ecosystem to customize the reports based on each of these requirements. And then it would use the Tableau Server REST API to publish that content, excuse me, sorry, to publish that content to the different sites, so that each site sees a slightly different variety of those workbooks. The advantage of this is that you only have to keep one master copy of the workbooks, and you don't have to manually customize all those workbooks. This is one of the more complex use cases, and again, it does kind of require a lot of development work, sometimes on the application side, to make it work. And that's really kind of the key takeaway from this, is that if you really want to do a very simple embedding of Tableau, it's so simple to do. You can drag and drop some code, and you're ready to go. But on the other hand, if you need really sophisticated, complex integration between Tableau and your application, you've got a great, really well documented toolbox that allows you to do all those things.